I recently had one of the Recover Your Soul community members reflect that there are books and books and books about how to raise babies, how to raise adolescents, how to raise your teenagers. And then once it gets to them leaving the house and going out and being adults, there aren't a lot of resources about how to let go of your adult kids. And I loved this reflection because this has been my journey. This has been part of my deep soul recovery, and my learning is how to stop having these codependent and enabling relationships with my children who are now adult men. They still have real life issues. They still have some addiction in their life. They still have the trials and tribulations of what it takes to be a young adult in the world right now. And they still have health issues. So recently, when I started becoming enmeshed and I got hooked again in dealing with my son's health issues that came up, I watched myself fall into old patterns, old unhealthy ways of thinking. And I was so grateful for soul recovery because it allowed me to see it more quickly. It allowed me to have compassion for myself and for him, and to recenter, reset, and show up in a healthy, whole, recovered way, using my soul recovery tools to be present for my adult child and not in a codependent, enabling relationship. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Recover Your Soul podcast, a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. My name is Reverend Rachel Harrison. I started Recover Your Soul after having profound changes in my life from my recovery of alcoholism, codependency, and control addiction. I was guided to share the tools and principles of spirituality and soul recovery to help others transform their lives as mine was transformed. For us to overcome external circumstances, we need to turn the attention to ourselves, focusing on our inner change and healing. Positive results in our lives will follow. Hello and welcome to the Recovery Soul podcast. I'm Reverend Rachel Harrison. Thank you for choosing to spend your time here today on this podcast. If you're new to the Recover Your Soul community, I am just so glad that you're here. It is by no mistake that you have found your way into this podcast, into this community. We're here together. We're recovering our souls. We're learning how to let go of codependency, how to step out of needing other people to be okay for us to be okay, how to learn how to stand in our own strength using a spiritual path to bring us a happy and healthy life. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm telling you, I was not there even 6 years ago before I started my soul recovery journey 5.5 years ago. Man, was I caught up trying to control and fix and manage and be in this place where I was so miserable around other people's lives. How easy it is to get caught up in losing ourselves. So I am just so grateful that you're here. So for today's episode, I wanted to talk about adult kids again because that is such a big piece of my life. And if you've listened to the podcast prior, you know I have two sons, Alex, who's 26, and Bodie, who is 24. They both live in California and have been there since the beginning of the pandemic. It has been this journey for me around them as my qualifiers, both as being addicts that didn't fall far from the tree of addiction that my husband and I are recovering from. Also, just in that codependent enabling place that we can get caught up in as parents, trying to make their lives be something that will make it so that they're more comfortable. Because if they're more comfortable, then I can be more comfortable. And I wanted to talk about it because I've been working so hard about it, and I've been talking to you about it, and it has been such a focus in my life, and I recently got rehooked. I wanted to share with you about how I caught myself, how I realized I had re-engaged in some old behaviors, some old patterns around Alex that were following old ways of being, of trying to fix, trying to control, trying to manipulate, and how I came back to myself, how I used soul recovery to bring myself back. Still the number one episode listened to in soul recovery is around detachment. In that first season, I didn't know what to talk about, and I was still really reluctant to talk about Al-Anon or AA because of the 12 traditions. And I was really in a place with Alex where I was struggling with how to not fix for him. And so I read the 7 detachments from the Al-Anon bookmark, and that episode really took off. And I thought, you know what? This is what people need to hear about. This is what's going on for me. This has been such a profound part of my life that I want to share it and I want to talk about it. So I'm going to reread the 7 detachments because I need them. I need them to bring myself back as I'm doing this unhooking, and then I'll tell you the story about the hook. This is a bookmark that I have that is well worn now. I'm just going to read from the very beginning. It says, "Detachment is neither kind nor unkind. It does not imply judgment or condemnation of the person or situation from which we are detaching. Separating ourselves from the adverse effects of another person's alcoholism, or we can say dysfunction or addiction, whatever that is, separating ourselves from another person's dysfunction can be a means of detaching. This doesn't necessarily require physical separation. Detachment can help us look at our situations realistically and objectively. Alcoholism, or any addiction, is a family disease. Living with the effects of someone else's addiction is too devastating for most people to bear without help. In Al-Anon, we learn nothing we say or do can cause or stop someone else's drinking. I'm going to read that again. In Al-Anon, we learn nothing we say or do can cause or stop someone else's addiction, right? Someone else's dysfunction. We're not responsible for another person's disease or recovery from it. Detachment allows us to let go of our obsession with another's behavior and begin to lead happier and more manageable lives, lives with dignity, rights, lives guided by power greater than ourselves. We can still love the person without liking the behavior. You've heard me talk about acceptance. You don't have to like it to accept it, but to truly and deeply accept it. And then here are those points. It says, in Al-Anon, we learn, 1, not to suffer because of the actions or reactions of other people. 2, not to allow ourselves to be used or abused by others in the interest of another's recovery. 3, not to do for others what they can do for themselves. 4, not to manipulate situations so that others will eat, go to bed, get up, pay bills, not drink, or behave as we see fit. 5, not to cover up for another's mistakes or misdeeds. 6, not to create a crisis. And 7, not to prevent a crisis if it's in the natural course of events. It says, by learning to focus on ourselves, our attitudes and well-being will improve. We allow the alcoholics in our lives to experience the consequences of their own actions. So I read this today because the story that happened in my life, it's so interesting how we can do so much work and we can get to this place in our recovery where we're feeling solid. I'm feeling pretty darn solid. I'm waking up every morning. I have my spiritual practice. I am so blessed to be working with so many of you and have a full and thriving spiritual coaching business, which I am so grateful to be assisting so many lives, to produce 2 podcasts a week with the Monday episodes that go on all platforms and the by subscription episode that's on Friday for Apple Podcast subscribers and Patreon members. And then, in addition to that, working on deeper dive Zoom workshops. I'm working on courses right now. I am really immersed in my spiritual practice. And yet, we are human. I am human. Those hooks can start to come in and they can catch us in ways that look different so that we forget what is going on. Alex's addiction at one point was really dire. Back when he was living here in Colorado in his early 20s, after he turned 21, there was definitely a time where he was using so much stuff and drinking so hard, I was terrified for him. And it was actually right when I had gotten sober. So I was really hoping that he would see what was happening with me. But indeed, he was on a pretty heavy drug and alcohol addiction period of his life. I was doing Al-Anon enough at that time to really be able to sort of step back and say, I just need to work on myself. I need to do my own thing. I need to trust that this is his journey. I need to let him have this experience. I need to not try to fix it. Man, if I can just concentrate on myself to stop drinking, that's about as much energy as I have. But it was really, really, really hard to watch. He ended up getting a DUI, which was such a gift to me from God that I just really thought that it was going to help him and keep him from falling down that road, and maybe he would sober up with me. And I got hooked, and I did those things where I made him promises if he would come to AA meetings with me, hoped that he would grasp on to recovery in the same way that I did. And he did. He came to meetings and he accommodated and he did whatever steps were required for his DUI to make it through that, and the classes and the testing and, all those things. So he had that period of time. And of course, after all the supervision is over and after you finish with the state mandated things, he went back to using and has never gone back to the extent in which he used before, that I know of. Again, they live in California, so to the benefit of myself, I can't actually see. But as you know, in our last times together, I've talked about on the podcast that he's definitely parties, and sometimes it's hard for me to watch and I get concerned, but it's not nearly at the levels at which it was during that very dark time. So I've been able to use soul recovery. I've been able to use Al-Anon to let go of their, not only Alex, but also Bodhi's consumption of drugs and alcohol for the most part. I definitely find myself needing to use some of my tools and use a lot of inner prayer and meditation in times of affirmation, using those tools of seeing the positive, not getting too caught up in the fear, not getting caught up in the worry, attending to myself and what my feelings are. So for the most part, I've been pretty good on the drug and alcohol end. What ended up happening recently, Alex has been moving up in his career and moved from being in the warehouse. He works for the same company as Bodhi, and he's an incredible artist and had been doing some side drawings for them and building up his artistic skill set. And eventually, through using some of his moments of more clarity that are some of the previous episodes where he did no drinking for a month, and it gave him some ability to really sort of see what he wanted in his life and moving forward and putting a whole bunch of energy into doing better for himself. And through that, he's ended up getting promoted and working up into the business that they are in, where he's doing all the graphics, all the illustrations for this company, which has a lot of really cool graphics and illustrations. So it's literally a dream come true that this kid who drew instead of doing his homework is finally getting to use this talent and gift that was given to him, this ability to use his artistic side to make money. If you're ready for soul recovery, as a spiritual coach, I can support your healing to help make real changes that will bring you a life of peace, happiness, connection, and abundance. You can also work in smaller groups by taking a deep dive in a Zoom workshop or with me in person at a retreat or an event. Join others on the soul recovery path once a month for the free Zoom support group or daily on the private Facebook page. Visit the website recoveryoursoul.net to book coaching sessions with me or find all the information you need about soul recovery, dates that are coming up, and how to register for those groups and workshops. To support the podcast and the community, check the links in the show notes to make a small monthly donation or a one-time donation of your choice that will make a huge impact to support this community and the soul recovery mission. Together, we can do the work that will recover your soul. I find that one of the hooks is that I get caught in my excitement that this is going to be the ticket. This is going to be what's going to make it so that he gets the self-esteem that I want him to have, or that he takes a hold of his life in a way that allows him to be happier and more comfortable. Because even though I have done so much work on being happy, even if my children aren't happy, of course, there is still the part of us that really genuinely wants them to live happy, fulfilled lives with the minimal amount of discomfort and pain. Absolutely. That is at the core of our being. That's what we want for our children. And we should never want any different. It's our attachment to what that looks like and how they're going to get there and whose responsibility it is for them to get there that creates that hook. I'm watching him doing so much better and being probably the happiest he's ever been in his adult life, with his dips that he has. He has always had some level of struggle around depression and anxiety, and that again is his to figure out, his to work on. I think a lot of what he has done in his using has been self-medication for those emotions, for those feelings. And as you know, in soul recovery, one of the things that we're working on is we're working on moving our attention to the soul and the wholeness that is on the inside, and detaching and letting go of the woundedness, the quote unquote brokenness, and the addiction that has consumed who their behavior becomes. So when I look at what's been going on for him and I see him moving more into his soul self, I can get lost in my attachment to wanting that to really start to take charge, to really want that to fill for him to really to let go of all that stuff. When he starts doing better, I catch myself wanting even more of that because I love seeing him do well. That's where we were. That's what's going on. So we've been having these conversations. He's been doing pretty good. He is in that place in his life. So then what ends up happening is we come back from the trip where we went to the festival with them, and he had had an earache at the festival, had a lot of pain around that. And so that was kind of hard to watch, but it had subsided, and he's got sinus issues. So he comes back from that. And I have told these stories, I think, in the podcast previously. He comes back from that. And then maybe a couple weeks later, he calls me in the middle of the night, 3:00 in the morning. He's having excruciating pain in his ear. He's having this massive ear infection. He's wondering whether he should go to the emergency room because it's just so intense. And so I talked about that part of the story where you don't just detach and say, hey, you're calling me in the middle of the night. Like, I'm not going to talk to you. You wake up and you show up. And I was really able to be present for him. And I was in that place in my life where I felt centered. I felt grounded. I didn't go into complete panic mode. I looked online to see maybe what was going on with his ear. We related that to the ear pain that he'd had a couple weeks before. This is probably an ear infection. Yep, it shows that there's this very piercing pain, not something you need to go to the emergency room for. That whole thing ended up starting a cycle around him reaching out to me to get support and help around what ended up being a pretty severe, massive double ear infection, sinus infection. Pretty big deal around how he had pink eye. I mean, it was like a whole thing, right? He was just a big cesspool of pus. And part of it ended up being that he always has ear pods in his ears, has always had sinus issues, and was probably doing too many drugs at this festival. And the mix of all of that just created this thing where he had this massive infection. So we got rehooked in this situation. And the interesting thing was the hook caught me without me seeing it because it wasn't necessarily drugs and alcohol. It was around his health, and his health is really important. And so I didn't even see it as clearly as I would have because I've worked so hard on this other piece of detaching from this other piece. And then there I was, right? I was caught up in some of the stuff on the detachment. I was starting to become the person that he called for every single thing. Do I need to make an appointment? I made an appointment. Here's what they said. And I got wrapped up in being a player in this movie of his. And it isn't that we're not supposed to be involved in their lives, it's around the level of enmeshment or the level of responsibility or the control that we start to have and how much attachment we have to being part of how this is going to work out. And after we get off the phone, am I still worrying about it? Am I still thinking about it? Is it consuming my time and my energy? And ultimately, yes, it was. As soon as he would say he got a doctor's appointment, then I would be waiting for the phone to ring after the doctor's appointment to see what did the doctor say. It happened so sneakily that I didn't catch it. After he had finished with this situation, he had gone to the doctor, we had worked on these things, I had helped pay for some of the bills of these doctor's appointments because he's always short of money. I had to give myself a check. And I caught myself at that moment and I said, ooh, Rach, you've gotten back into that place where you're thinking about him and what's going on with him and what is happening in his health life and worrying about him outside of your own being. And I did some work around that. If you've done step 1 with me as a spiritual client, we look at what are we trying to control? What are the aspects we're trying to control? And then we remember in step 1 of soul recovery, we're powerless around every single thing outside of ourselves, and that our attachment, our desire to control people, places, and things is causing us pain and suffering, and that suffering is that attachment. And so I recognized that I was on top of what I call the rock of what we think that we're supposed to be helping with, doing, fixing. And I could see so clearly that I was on top trying to fix it, trying to help because I want him to get back to that place where he's relaxed and happy and feeling good. But the only control we have is underneath of what we're feeling. And if I'm honest with myself about what I'm feeling scared that all of this is going to fall away. That this is going to be a slippery slope that's going to actually take him down from this place that he's been and that he's going to go back into depression. And I'm terrified of that. And then that's the place where I attend to myself. That's the place where I realize I'm trying to control him because I'm afraid. And then shortly after this happens, he meets a girl and starts dating somebody, which again is like, hip, hip, hooray. I'm so excited. I want him to be happy. I want him to feel loved. I want him to love himself. I want him to have good things in his life. And oh, good, he's done this. He's gotten over that. And then he has a huge crash on his one wheel. Calls me the next day and says, hey, I'm wondering if I should go to the emergency room, right? This thing that he has of calling me and saying, I need to know whether I need to go to the emergency room. And even though that now they have health insurance, we're still talking about $7,000 deductibles, which nobody's got an extra $7,000 laying around ready to just be easily spent on crashes. And my heart just sunk and I got rehooked on his health and fear and what was going on with him. Now, I won't go into all the stuff about the crash. He's going to be okay. He probably hurt his knee. He needs to go to the doctor and figure out what's going on. That's even a whole long story, so we're not going to get there. But what I realized was that I was starting to do the thing again where I was consumed with every aspect of what was going on in his life. And I was losing that perspective that is the reminder that this is indeed his adult life. and that I can be compassionate. I can be present for him, but I need to let go of the control that I'm trying to have to fix it, to make him have different choices. I have to trust and believe that this is indeed part of his journey, his path, his responsibility. Looking underneath that rock, looking underneath what I'm trying to control, and being even more kind to myself, compassionate to myself, and handing it over to higher power. This is a spiritual path to a happy and healthy life. And when I sit down and I do the journaling and I say, "Oh, holy presence of source, thank you for holding my son in the light. Thank you for giving him the guidance, the direction that he needs to do what's best for him and his body. May he make choices that is right for him in the long run. May I be relieved of the need to feel like I need to fix it, that I need to do something about it. May I let go of the belief that it is mine to fix. May I not prevent a crisis if it is in the natural course of events." That part of those detachments, to not be the one to have him make the doctor's appointments, not be the one to fix, not be the one managing his life, and potentially trying to prevent a crisis if it is in the course of his life. I don't know why he's had to go through these medical issues, but some of it is because of choices that he's making. And then I get caught up in what is the outcome and trying to fix that outcome instead of having that place of compassion, empathy, where you're like, wow, that's really hard. I'm sorry you have to go through that. Now, my big fear about this crash, unlike the ears he finally got medication and it's going to clear up. My real fear about this crash is that he's done some substantial damage to his knee. He's going to blow it off and not actually finally go see the doctor because he's afraid of the money, and that some long-term damage is going to happen down the road. And underneath the rock, I feel that I'm responsible, that a good mom would make them do something. Now, I've suggested, I've offered to help pay for, and then I have to let it go. And then I have to look at my son for the wholeness that he is, for the light that he is, for the truth of his learning and his experience and his life, and that he is indeed an adult living the adult way. And stop treating him like he's a little kid again, and I personally am the one who's managing his life. That's not my role anymore. And so we ended up having a conversation the other day where I actually said, I may need to take a break from talking to you. And he was really taken aback. And he said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And I said, if we're going to be calling and talking all the time, and you're calling me kind of in this crisis, but then you're rejecting what you're asking for, the advice that you're actually asking for, I'm having a hard time with that. Now, we've had conversations in soul recovery around advice versus opinion. And in this situation, he's calling me. He's asking me, what do I do now? Who should I see? What should I do next? And even though I'm giving him advice, I watched myself get caught in wanting him to follow my directions. That even in advice over an unwanted opinion, we still have to let go of the outcome. We have to let go of whether they're going to take the advice or not. And as I was talking to him and I was starting to cry because I could feel this emotion around how much I wanted him to follow my oh so good directions, I saw the hook and I saw the truth of my attachment and my need to fix and control. And I could see it so clearly that it let go. And I remembered that he's in the hands of a higher power, and I can trust he's in the hands of a higher power, and I can trust whatever I say, whatever I do, whatever's needed will be picked up, and whatever lessons that he needs to learn are his to learn. And then I felt a freedom within myself. We ended up talking some more, and it was fine and lighthearted. He heard me, which I appreciate. We worked things through a little bit more. And then he sent me some cute pictures of how well he's doing. Instead of what I was getting a lot of was like how yucky his life was. I wasn't getting but I'm also happy and doing well. And that's one of the things that came out of it was I'm always saying that we need to be looking more at what is working instead of what isn't working. But when someone's only giving you what isn't working, it's hard to do that. So his sending me some happy pictures with him and this new person in his life helped me to let go of that sticky part of me that wants to fix and control and just release him out into the world as an adult man. So I'm going to keep working on it. I'm so grateful that I was able to come back to myself. It's not about judging ourselves. It's not about me having my critic come to me and say, "Oh, Rachel, I can't believe you talk about this. This is your whole, spiritual work is around this. And there you were hooked in." I saw it. And that's what it's about. It's about coming back and giving yourself compassion and slowly, slowly untying these knots and these tethers that have been created for a long time. I'm so grateful. And I'm grateful for the awareness. I'm grateful for the learning. This curriculum of life is helping us to grow and to learn. And each one of these situations can either be seen as something that is opening us up and we're learning from, or it can be seen as a hardship. And I will choose learning. I choose love. I choose awareness, and I choose soul recovery. As I always say, if you are having situations like this in your own life and you want to work through them with me and be able to find your own healing, that's what one-on-one coaching sessions with me is all about. I'm here to support you on your soul recovery. Until next time, namaste. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Recovery Soul podcast and being part of this amazing and growing community. If you loved this episode and you want even more, there is a bonus episode with even more content every Friday. This is by subscription. You can access that by being a Patreon member, and there's 3 tiers of giving of your choice, or an Apple Podcast subscriber. Once you have subscribed, you have access to a whole back catalog of episodes as well. If you would go to the website, recoveryoursoul.net, and I would love for you to subscribe to email updates so that you can keep posted with everything that's going on, different events, what dates are coming up, any reminders. There's only a couple emails each month. I hope you'll follow Recover Your Soul on social media. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, the private Facebook community page, TikTok, and if you want guided meditations, look for Reverend Rachel Harrison on Insight Timer. I really encourage you to take advantage of the one-on-one coaching. This is a unique, intuitive connection between the two of us. There are 9 steps to soul recovery, and I do use those 9 steps to loosely guide us through whatever your coaching that you need. But really, it's about creating a way for you to feel comfortable around your healing of your past, looking at the situations in your life. What are the patterns? What are the beliefs that are holding you back? Breaking free from those patterns, breaking free from those beliefs, letting go of control, letting go of the people around you, and taking your power back. Discovering who you are and who you want to be in the world and how I can support you to do this. And also, you're sharing this podcast with your friends, putting 5 stars, leaving reviews, really sharing this with others is growing the community. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for supporting Recover Your Soul. And I know that together we can do the work that will recover your soul.